Michael hadn't planned to listen to old voicemails. The notification had been sitting on his phone for weeks. It was one of those automatic reminders that appeared after software updates, telling him that older recordings had been archived. He was sitting alone in his apartment on a Sunday evening, with the television running in the background and his laptop open on the coffee table in front of him. He wasn't really watching anything. For the third time in 10 minutes, he found himself staring at the same email without reading a single word. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows, creating that low, repetitive sound that made apartments feel smaller somehow. The living room was dim except for the blue light from the television. Without thinking much about it, Michael opened the voicemail folder. Most of the recordings were ordinary things. His mother reminding him to call back, work messages, appointments, random things that should have been deleted years ago. He scrolled absent-mindedly until his thumb stopped. There was one recording from almost a year earlier. The contact name above it said, Claire. Michael stared at the screen for several seconds. He almost deleted it without listening. Almost. Then he pressed play. For a few moments, there was only background noise. Traffic somewhere nearby, wind, footsteps. Then Claire laughed. Not loudly, just softly, somewhere farther away from the phone. And then Michael heard himself. "Wait, don't start walking without me!" He frowned immediately, because he didn't remember this. Then Claire's voice returned. "I'm not walking fast, you're just slow." More laughter, footsteps, then silence. The recording ended. Michael sat still, because suddenly he remembered exactly when it happened. They had been leaving a bookstore downtown after spending almost an entire Saturday together. Nothing important had happened that day. No anniversary, no special occasion, no dramatic conversation. They had looked at books, argued over movies in the cafe section, gotten coffee afterward, and walked around the city for hours. Ordinary day, completely forgettable. Except apparently it wasn't. The strange thing about memory was that important moments rarely looked important while they were happening. Michael suddenly remembered details he hadn't thought about in years. Claire had been wearing a dark green coat because she always complained black coats made winter feel depressing. She had bought a novel she was excited about and spent 20 minutes trying to explain the plot while they walked. Michael remembered pretending to understand because she had become so animated talking about it that interrupting her felt unnecessary. He remembered her reaching for his hand automatically while crossing the street without even looking at him. Small things. Things that had once felt permanent. Michael and Claire had been together for 4 years. People used to describe them as balanced, calm, easy together. They rarely fought, rarely raised their voices. Michael had always considered that a good sign. He thought difficult relationships were loud and obvious. He thought healthy relationships felt simple. And for a long time, his relationship with Claire had felt exactly like that. Until somewhere along the way, things started changing. Not suddenly, not enough for anyone to notice. Claire simply became quieter. Not physically quieter, emotionally quieter. At first, Michael barely paid attention. People got tired. Work became stressful. Life happened. He told himself that. Then Claire started repeating stories she had already told him. Not because she forgot, because she couldn't remember whether she had actually said them out loud before. Sometimes she would stop speaking and ask, "Did I already tell you this?" Michael usually smiled. Maybe. He thought he was being easygoing, thought he was being relaxed. Now he wondered if she had heard something else. Because now he remembered smaller moments too. Claire sitting beside him on the couch while he answered emails for almost an hour. Claire stopping halfway through stories because she realized he wasn't listening. Claire looking at him after saying something important and repeating, "Michael?" Only for him to realize she had already said his name twice. At the time, none of those moments felt serious, because there was always tomorrow. Tomorrow they would have dinner somewhere nice. Tomorrow work would calm down. Tomorrow they would spend more time together. Tomorrow was endless back then. Then one night, Claire asked him something strange. They had been lying in bed with the lights off. Michael remembered because he had been half asleep. Claire quietly said, "Do you think people can slowly become lonely with someone instead of without them?" Michael remembered opening his eyes, remembered thinking it was an odd question. Then he remembered answering, "You're overthinking again." Claire didn't say anything afterward. At the time, it felt like an ordinary conversation. Now, sitting alone on his couch almost a year later, Michael realized something that made his chest feel heavy. He couldn't remember whether he had even turned toward her when he answered. He closed the voicemail and stared at the television screen. The show had ended without him noticing, and now some late-night commercial was playing. Because Claire hadn't left suddenly. That was the thing. There had been no explosion, no betrayal, no other person, no dramatic ending. There had only been distance. Slow, almost invisible distance. The kind that was impossible to notice while standing inside it. Michael remembered the final months together differently now. He remembered Claire becoming quieter during dinner. He remembered looking at his phone while she talked, remembered saying, "Sorry, what?" more times than he could count. He remembered being physically present in conversations he had never actually joined. At the time, none of it had seemed serious. Then, eventually, Claire sat across from him at the kitchen table one evening and said, "I don't think you're here anymore." Michael remembered staring at her, confused because he was sitting right there. He remembered wanting her to explain, wanting examples, wanting details. Now he understood something that made him feel sick. She had been explaining for months, just in smaller ways, quieter ways, ways that hadn't sounded important enough to him. The rain outside had stopped. Michael looked down at the phone still sitting in his hand. Then he pressed play again. Traffic sounds, footsteps, Claire laughing. "I'm not walking fast, you're just slow." He listened twice, then 3 times. Because suddenly, what hurt wasn't losing Claire. It wasn't even the breakup itself. It was realizing that, somewhere between ordinary days and postponed conversations, he had stopped noticing the person walking beside him. And the worst part was that he wasn't listening to a memory. He was listening to evidence. If this story felt familiar, there are more like it here.